"I can't be a father," the rancher said sadly, until an Apache girl whispered, "Then let me help you." The rancher woke before sunrise, as he always did. The sky outside his small wooden house was still dark, with only a thin line of pale light touching the far hills. The land was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that had followed him for years. He sat on the edge of his bed for a moment, staring at the floor, feeling the same heavy weight in his chest that greeted him every morning. He was a man used to hard work, but some pains could not be fixed with strong hands. His name was Daniel Harper. He was known around the area as a reliable rancher, someone who kept his word and paid his debts on time. But people did not know much about his personal life, and he preferred it that way. After his wife left years ago, Daniel learned that solitude was easier than answering questions. He pulled on his boots and stepped outside. The air was cold and dry, carrying the smell of dust and grass. The land stretched wide and open, fenced by old wooden posts and wire that he repaired himself. This ranch was all he had left. He had poured his time, money, and heart into it, hoping it would fill the space that something else never could. As he walked toward the barn, memories followed him, unwanted and sharp. Years ago, when he and his wife, Emily, had still believed in the future, they sat in a doctor's office holding hands. Daniel remembered how tight her grip was, how her fingers trembled as the doctor spoke carefully, choosing words that still cut deep. He remembered the sound of Emily's breath when she realized what those words meant. He could never be a father. The doctor had explained it clearly. There were no treatments that could change the truth. Daniel nodded, trying to stay calm, trying to be strong. Emily cried quietly beside him. At first they told each other love would be enough, that they would build a life without children. But love, Daniel learned, sometimes needs hope to survive. Over time, Emily grew distant. She started talking about seeing other doctors, other opinions. Daniel went along, even though he already knew the answers would not change. When hope finally left her eyes, she packed her bags and said she needed a different life. She did not blame him. That almost hurt more. Daniel never tried to stop her. Now, years later, he lived with the echo of that goodbye. The ranch filled his days, but his nights were empty. He worked harder than most men his age, not because he had to, but because work kept his mind quiet. He fed the horses, checked the fences, and repaired a broken gate near the south field. The sun climbed higher, warming the land, but it did nothing to warm his heart. As he worked, he noticed children playing in the distance on a neighboring property. Their laughter carried on the wind, faint but clear. Daniel stopped and leaned against the fence. He watched them for a moment longer than he meant to. A boy chased a girl, both laughing, their joy simple and free. Daniel felt the familiar ache return. He turned away before the feeling could grow stronger. He had learned not to linger on things that were never meant for him. By midday, clouds began to gather. Dark and heavy, they rolled in faster than expected. Storms were common in this area, but something about this one felt different. The air grew thick, and the wind picked up dust from the ground. Daniel finished his work early and headed back toward the house. He secured the animals and closed the barn doors just as the first drops of rain fell. Thunder followed soon after, loud and sharp, shaking the ground beneath his feet. Inside his house, Daniel lit a small lamp and sat at the kitchen table. The storm grew stronger, rain beating against the roof and windows. He poured himself a cup of coffee, though it was already cold by the time he drank it. His thoughts wandered as they often did during storms. He thought about the idea of family, about what it meant to belong somewhere. He told himself he had accepted his fate long ago. Still, there were moments when the loneliness felt heavier than usual. As the storm raged on, a strange sound reached his ears. At first he thought it was the wind pushing against the walls. Then he heard it again, faint but clear. A soft sound, almost like a cough or a small cry, carried through the rain. Daniel froze. He stood up slowly and listened. The sound came again, closer this time. His heart began to beat faster. No one ever came this far out during storms. The nearest town was miles away, and travelers avoided this land when the weather turned bad. He grabbed his jacket and stepped outside despite the rain. The wind hit him hard, soaking his clothes in seconds. He scanned the area, eyes narrowed, trying to see through the sheets of rain. Then he saw movement near the old shed by the edge of his property. Daniel hesitated for a brief moment. A part of him wanted to go back inside to tell himself it was nothing. But something deeper, something he could not ignore, pushed him forward. He walked toward the shed, his boots sinking into the mud. As he got closer, he saw a small figure crouched near the wall trying to stay dry. The figure looked fragile, barely protected from the storm. "Hey," Daniel called out gently, raising his voice over the thunder. "You all right?" The figure flinched. As he came closer, he realized it was a young girl. She looked no older than 8 or 9. Her dark hair was wet and clung to her face. Her clothes were thin and worn, offering little protection from the cold rain. Her eyes were wide and alert, filled with fear and caution. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He kept his distance, lowering himself slightly so he would not appear threatening. "It's okay," he said softly. "I won't hurt you." The girl said nothing. She watched him closely as if weighing whether to run. "You can come inside," Daniel continued. "There's food and a dry place to sit. This storm's not safe." For a long moment she did not move. Thunder cracked above them and she flinched again. Finally, slowly, she stood up. She did not speak, but she followed him, keeping a careful distance. Inside the house, Daniel gave her a towel and a dry blanket. She accepted them quietly, wrapping herself tightly as if she had learned long ago not to ask for more than offered. Daniel poured her a glass of water and placed it on the table. "My name is Daniel," he said, sitting across from her. "What's yours?" She hesitated, then spoke in a soft voice. "Lena," he nodded, respecting her silence. "You're safe here, Lena." She looked around the room, her eyes taking in every detail. The house was simple, clean but worn, like the man who lived in it. She seemed unsure whether to trust the calm. Daniel noticed how small she looked in the chair, how tired her face was. He felt something stir inside him, a feeling he had pushed away for years. He quickly reminded himself not to get attached. He had learned that lesson too well. "You got family nearby?" he asked gently. Lena shook her head. The answer was quiet, but it carried weight. Daniel leaned back in his chair, the truth settling heavily between them. He told himself this was temporary, just shelter from a storm, nothing more. Still, as thunder rolled outside and the rain continued to fall, Daniel realized that his quiet, empty world had shifted, even if only slightly. He did not know it yet, but the silence he had lived with for so long had finally been broken, and nothing would be the same again. The storm lasted through the night. Rain fell heavy and steady, and the wind kept pushing against the small house as if testing its strength. Inside, the lamp burned low, casting soft shadows on the walls. Daniel sat in his chair, pretending to read an old newspaper, but his eyes kept moving toward the girl sitting quietly across the room. Lena stayed wrapped in the blanket, her knees pulled close to her chest. She did not speak much. She watched everything, how Daniel moved, how he set his cup down, how he stood up slowly so he would not surprise her. It was clear she had learned to be careful around adults. Daniel noticed this, and it troubled him. He had met children before, of course. Friends' kids, neighbors' kids, but this was different. This child carried silence the way grown people carried regrets. It sat on her shoulders, heavy and practiced. "You hungry?" Daniel asked after a while. Lena nodded slightly. He went to the small kitchen and warmed up some soup. It was nothing special, just something simple he usually ate alone. He placed the bowl in front of her and stepped back, giving her space. She waited until he sat down again before lifting the spoon. Daniel watched her eat slowly, carefully, as if she was afraid the food might disappear if she rushed. That sight stirred something deep inside him. He looked away, focusing instead on the sound of the rain. After she finished, Daniel cleared the bowl and washed it. He showed her the small couch near the window and told her she could sleep there. He took an old pillow from the bedroom and placed it gently on the couch. "I'll be right over there," he said, pointing to the chair nearby. "You rest." Lena nodded again. She lay down but did not close her eyes right away. Daniel stayed awake too, listening to the storm and the slow rhythm of her breathing once she finally slept. He did not understand why he felt so uneasy. He told himself this was just kindness, nothing more. Anyone would help a child caught in a storm. Still, his chest felt tight and sleep did not come easily. When morning arrived, the storm had passed. Sunlight broke through the clouds, shining on the wet land outside. The air felt clean, fresh, almost new. Daniel woke early, as always. He moved quietly, not wanting to wake Lena. He stepped outside to check the animals and survey the damage from the storm. A few fence posts had fallen, and some branches were scattered across the ground, but nothing he could not fix later. When he returned to the house, Lena was awake, sitting on the couch with the blanket still wrapped around her. She looked less afraid now, but still unsure. "Morning," Daniel said softly. "Morning," she replied. He poured her a cup of warm tea and handed it to her. She accepted it with both hands. For a moment they sat in silence, the kind that felt awkward but not uncomfortable. "I'll need to call someone," Daniel said carefully. "Make sure you're okay." Lena's fingers tightened around the cup. "Who?" she asked quietly. "Someone who can help," he said, choosing his words with care. "Maybe find your family." She looked down. "I don't have anyone close." Daniel studied her face. "Where were you staying before the storm?" "With my aunt," she said after a pause. "But she moved." "Moved where?" Lena shook her head. "I don't know." Daniel did not push further. He had learned that some answers came only when people felt ready. Instead, he nodded and stood up. "I've got work to do outside," he said. "You can stay in here, I'll be close." She nodded again. As Daniel worked through the morning, he found his attention drifting back to the house again and again. He checked the window often, making sure she was still inside, still safe. Each time he saw her sitting quietly, something eased inside him. Around midday, he brought her outside so she could stretch her legs. He showed her the horses from a distance and explained how the ranch worked. She listened carefully, her eyes bright with interest. "They're big," she said. "They are," Daniel agreed. "But they're gentle if you treat them right." She smiled at that, just a small one, but it felt like a reward. Over the next few days, Lena stayed. Daniel told himself it was only until he could figure out what to do next. He made phone calls, but information was limited. No one nearby had reported a missing child. Each call left him more uncertain. Lena began to help in small ways. She swept the floor without being asked. She fed the chickens under Daniel's watch. She listened when he explained things, never interrupting, always focused. Daniel found himself talking more than usual. He told her about the land, about weather patterns, about how his father taught him to fix fences. He did not talk about his past, not yet. But even these simple stories felt like opening a door he had kept locked. One evening, as they sat outside watching the sky change colors, Lena spoke up. "Why do you live alone?" she asked. Daniel was caught off guard. He stared at the horizon, thinking. "Things don't always turn out the way we plan," he said finally. She seemed to accept that answer. After a moment she said, "I like it here, it's quiet." Daniel nodded. "Quiet can be good." But as he said it, he realized how different quiet felt now. That night, as he lay in bed, Daniel faced a truth he had avoided for years. Having Lena in his home had changed something. The emptiness felt smaller. The silence no longer pressed in so hard. The realization scared him. He reminded himself again that this was temporary. He could not afford to hope for more. Hope had hurt him once before. Still, as he listened to the sounds of the house, soft footsteps, a door closing gently, Daniel understood something important. He had not lost the ability to care, and that frightened him more than loneliness ever had. Days passed, and life on the ranch slowly found a new rhythm. Daniel woke before sunrise as always, but now the mornings felt different. There was another presence in the house. The sound of light footsteps, the soft clink of a cup being moved, the quiet hum of someone awake beside him. These small changes stayed with him throughout the day. Lena adjusted quickly, though she remained careful. She followed rules without being reminded and never complained. Daniel noticed how she always asked before touching anything, even simple things like a book on the table or a tool near the door. It told him more about her past than any long story ever could. One morning, Daniel found her standing near the fence, watching him repair a broken post. She did not interrupt, just stood there, patient and curious. "You can hand me the nails if you want," he said. Her eyes widened slightly. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "Just the small ones." She picked them up carefully and handed them to him one by one. They worked in silence for a while. Daniel realized he liked the quiet companionship. It did not feel heavy. It felt shared. As the days continued, Lena became more comfortable. She started asking questions. Not many, but enough to show she was paying attention. "Why do you fix the fence every year?" she asked one afternoon. "Because if I don't," Daniel replied, "everything inside wanders off." She thought about that for a moment. "Like people." Daniel paused, surprised by the question. He looked at her, but her face was calm, thoughtful. "Maybe," he said slowly. "Sometimes people need fences too." She nodded, as if that made perfect sense. In the evenings, they often sat together on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the hills. The sky changed colors slowly, and the air cooled just enough to be comfortable. Lena liked those moments the most. Daniel could tell. She leaned back in her chair, her shoulders less tense than usual. One evening, she spoke without looking at him. "Do you miss someone?" Daniel felt the question land gently but firmly. He did not answer right away. He stared at the horizon, where the sun had almost disappeared. "Yes," he said at last. "Who?" "My wife," he replied honestly. "She left a long time ago." "Did she go far?" "Yes." Lena stayed quiet for a while, then she said, "I miss people too." Daniel glanced at her. "Do you want to talk about them?" She shook her head. "Not today." "That's okay," he said, and he meant it. That night, Daniel lay awake longer than usual. His thoughts kept returning to a truth he had avoided. Lena was not just passing through his life anymore. She had become part of it, even if neither of them had said it out loud. One afternoon, as they cleaned up after lunch, Lena asked a question that changed everything. "Can I ask you something important?" Daniel nodded. "You can ask me anything." She took a deep breath. "Why don't you have children?" The question was simple, honest. And it cut deeper than she knew. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He turned toward the sink, gripping the edge for a moment. He had spent years avoiding this topic. He did not know how to explain it to a child. "I was told I couldn't," he said quietly. Lena waited. "It means," he continued, choosing his words carefully, "that I was never able to have kids of my own." She frowned slightly, thinking. "Did that make you sad?" "Yes," Daniel admitted. "Very." She stepped closer. "But you still like kids?" Daniel let out a small breath. "I do." She was quiet for a moment, then said something that stayed with him forever. "Then maybe that's enough." Daniel looked at her. "What do you mean?" She shrugged gently. "You take care of me, you listen, you don't yell, you make food and fix things. That's what grown-ups who care do." Daniel felt something break open inside his chest. Not pain this time, but something warm and frightening. He sat down at the table, suddenly tired. "Lena," he said softly, "being a father is more than just caring." She looked at him seriously. "I think caring is the biggest part." Her words stayed in the air between them. That night, Daniel barely slept. He replayed her sentence again and again. Caring is the biggest part. He had spent so long believing fatherhood was about blood, about things he could never give. He had never considered that choice mattered more than chance. The next day, Daniel received a visit from two officials. They arrived in a plain truck and spoke calmly, asking questions about Lena. They said they were following reports of a child seen near the area. Lena stood close to Daniel as they talked. Her hand found his sleeve without thinking. The officials explained that there were procedures to follow, places she could go, systems meant to help. Daniel listened, his heart pounding. Every word felt like a step pulling her farther away. When they asked Lena if she felt safe, she nodded. "Yes," she said. "He's kind." Daniel felt a lump rise in his throat. The officials said they would return soon with next steps. As their truck disappeared down the road, silence returned, but this silence was sharp, filled with fear. Lena looked up at Daniel. "Are they taking me away?" "I don't know yet," he said honestly. She nodded, trying to be brave. "Okay." That evening, Daniel sat alone at the kitchen table long after Lena had gone to sleep. The lamp flickered softly. He stared at the worn wood beneath his hands. He realized something then, something he could no longer ignore. He did not just care about Lena. He was afraid of losing her. The man who once believed he could never be a father finally understood the truth. He had already stepped into that role, not by force, not by birth, but by choice. And now, he would have to decide whether he was brave enough to stand by it. The days after the official's visit felt longer than any Daniel could remember. Time moved slowly, like the sun dragging itself across the sky. Every sound made him tense. Every truck passing on the distant road made his heart jump. He tried to keep his routine the same, but inside nothing felt steady. Lena noticed the change. She spoke even less than before, watching Daniel with careful eyes. She stayed close to him when he worked outside, sitting on a rock or the porch steps, never wandering far. At night, she checked the door twice before going to sleep, as if afraid something might change while she rested. Daniel hated that he could not give her clear answers. One morning, as they ate breakfast in silence, Lena finally spoke. "Are they coming back today?" Daniel paused, holding his cup. "They might," he said honestly. "What happens then?" she asked. He took a slow breath. "They'll talk to us again, ask more questions." "About me?" "Yes." "About you too?" she asked. He nodded. Lena looked down at her hands. "If I have to go somewhere else," she said quietly, "will you be okay?" The question hit him harder than anything before. Daniel stood up and turned toward the window. He did not trust his voice yet. "I don't want you to go," he said finally. She looked up, surprised. "You do?" "No," he said, turning back to her. "I don't." Her eyes filled, but she blinked fast, holding it back. "I don't want to go either." They sat there, facing a truth neither had said out loud before. This was no longer about shelter from a storm. It was about belonging. Later that day, Daniel drove into town. He had avoided it for years, keeping his world small and quiet. But now he needed answers. He spoke to a local worker he trusted, someone who knew how these situations worked. The conversation was long and difficult. "There are steps," the man explained. "Paperwork, home checks, time." "I'm willing," Daniel said without hesitation. The man studied him. "You sure this changes things?" Daniel nodded. "I already changed." On the drive back, Daniel felt fear, but also something else, purpose. For the first time in years, his life was moving towards something instead of away from it. When he returned, Lena was waiting on the porch. She stood up when she saw him. "You're back," she said. "I am," he replied, "and I'm not going anywhere." That night, Daniel explained what he could in simple words. He told her there might be meetings, questions, and waiting. He did not promise anything he could not control. Lena listened carefully. "Does that mean," she asked, "you're trying?" "Yes," Daniel said. "I am." She nodded slowly. Then, for the first time since she arrived, she stepped forward and hugged him. It was brief and gentle, but it felt like a promise. The next weeks were full of visits and conversations. People came to see the ranch, to talk to Daniel, to observe how they lived. Daniel answered every question honestly. He spoke about his past, his loss, his fears. He did not hide anything. Each time, Lena stayed close, calm but alert. One afternoon, after a long meeting, Daniel felt exhausted. He sat on the porch steps, rubbing his hands together. Lena sat beside him. "Are you tired?" she asked. "Yes," he admitted. She nodded. "Me too." They sat quietly. Then she said, "Even if it doesn't work, thank you for trying." Daniel turned to her. "It matters," he said firmly. "No matter what." As days turned into weeks, something else began to change. Daniel noticed how naturally Lena fit into his life. How she remembered small things, like when he needed help or when to stay quiet. How she laughed more now, soft at first, then freer. He realized he was learning too, learning patience, learning how to explain instead of command. Learning that strength did not always mean standing alone. One evening after a long day, Daniel sat by the window while Lena drew pictures at the table. She slid one toward him. It was a simple drawing. A house. A fence. Two figures standing side by side. "This is us," she said. Daniel swallowed hard. "It's perfect," he said. Not long after, the final visit came. The officials sat at the table, calm and serious. Lena sat quietly, her hands folded. They spoke about responsibility, about care, about long-term plans. Then one of them asked Daniel a question he had been preparing for. "Why do you want to do this?" Daniel did not hesitate. "Because she belongs here," he said, "and because I belong with her." The room was quiet for a moment. That night, after everyone left, Daniel and Lena sat outside under the stars. The air was cool, peaceful. "Do you think it will be okay?" Lena asked. Daniel looked at the sky. "I don't know everything," he said, "but I know this: whatever happens, you won't face it alone." She leaned her head against his arm. For the first time in his life, Daniel felt like the future was not something to fear. It was something to protect. Time did not rush forward after that night. It moved carefully, step by step, like someone crossing unfamiliar ground. Daniel learned that waiting was now part of his life. Waiting for calls, waiting for answers, waiting for moments that could change everything. But even with the waiting, life continued. Each morning, Daniel and Lena followed a quiet routine. They shared breakfast at the small kitchen table. Lena liked sitting in the same chair every day. Daniel noticed it and made sure no one else ever took it. After breakfast, she helped in simple ways, watering plants, organizing tools, feeding the animals under his watch. The ranch felt alive in a way it never had before. Lena began attending a small local school. On her first day, she stood by the door holding her bag tightly. "What if they don't like me?" she asked. Daniel crouched to her level. "Then we'll get through that too," he said. "But I think you'll be just fine." When she returned that afternoon, her face was brighter. She talked about a teacher who smiled a lot and a girl who shared her lunch. Daniel listened closely, nodding, asking questions. He realized he liked hearing about her day more than anything else. At night, Daniel read while Lena drew or worked on homework nearby. The house no longer felt silent. It felt full, even in the quiet moments. Weeks later, the final decision came. Daniel was fixing a gate when he saw a familiar truck approach. His hands froze. He wiped them on his jeans and walked toward the house. Lena stood beside him, her fingers brushing his sleeve. Inside, the officials spoke calmly, clearly. They explained that after careful review, they believed Lena was safe, supported, and cared for. They said the placement would continue with guidance and follow-ups. Daniel felt the words settle slowly. Lena looked up at him. "Does that mean?" she asked. Daniel nodded, his voice thick. "It means you're staying." She did not shout. She did not jump. She simply stepped forward and held his hand tightly as if making sure he was real. After they left, Daniel sat down heavily. The weight he had carried for years finally lifted. He rested his elbows on his knees and breathed deeply. "I'm glad," Lena said softly. "So am I," he replied. Life did not become perfect. There were still hard days, days when Lena felt unsure, days when Daniel doubted himself, but they faced them together. Daniel learned how to listen instead of fix everything. He learned that sometimes Lena needed answers, and sometimes she just needed quiet company. Lena learned that she did not have to be careful all the time. That mistakes did not mean losing a place. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sky turn orange and purple, Lena spoke. "You once said you couldn't be a father," she said. Daniel nodded. "I did." "Do you still think that?" He thought carefully. "I think I was wrong," she smiled. As seasons changed, so did Daniel. He laughed more. He worried differently. He planned ahead in ways he never had before. The ranch was still his work, but Lena had become his reason. One day, Daniel hung a small photo on the wall. It showed the ranch at sunset with two figures standing near the fence. Lena noticed it. "That looks like us," she said. "It is," Daniel replied. She leaned against him. "I'm glad I came here." Daniel rested his hand gently on her shoulder. "So am I." Years later, people would say Daniel Harper was a good father. Not because he had all the answers, but because he chose to stay. Because he showed up every day. Because he understood that family was not about what you were given at birth, but what you chose to protect. And every once in a while, when the land grew quiet and the sky stretched wide above them, Daniel would remember the man he once was, the one who believed his life would always be empty. He would look at Lena, steady and safe, and know the truth. He had never been broken. He had only been waiting.